And we're live. And it is quite a day today. Thanks for joining me tonight at 7 o'clock. Regularly on Thursdays, I'm live streaming, and we can have a good discussion. Tonight, we are talking about education and the role that education plays and media of what's happening around the United States in particular, about what's going on and in our state in Wisconsin. That's my state. And so welcome. I encourage you to like, subscribe, and follow if you want to more updates on these kinds of discussions. Definitely looking to continue these dialogues together. What's really great is that there is a lot happening in these spheres. In Wisconsin in particular. And one of the things that, people might not be familiar with is that there are really three big developments that are happening right now. Right now, we've got the Wisconsin Department of Instruction putting out a report that the grades of our students in the entire state are incredibly low. And there is a reason for this, my friends. There are many reasons for this, as a matter of fact, that I can directly speak to, which we will be talking about. Wisconsin is also thinking about banning student phones in classrooms. They have already decided this is going to happen. We are going to be banning student phones in classrooms. We're going to talk about why, what exactly, is that a good idea? Is that not a good idea? How would that actually work? And what it's like on the ground level. And then we're going to also talk about what's happening in AI, the revolution that is happening in AI. It literally is another major revolution in technology, and it is affecting education as the primary sphere that it is affecting. Technically, it's disrupting a lot of different spheres, but I would say education the most. And a lot of people are catastrophizing, oh, this will be the end. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, we'll never be able to trust anybody again. Oh, if we see anybody using AI, pox upon them. We'll talk all about that and a little bit about history and see how that panned out in the course of history. And so if you're joining me for the first time, my name is Cody Adams. So I am an educator. That is my background in education. I started as a teacher in the school systems. I started first in Christian schools and then moving into public schools, doing substituting and doing a lot of different things within the realm of education. I tutored. I was in museums for a time and I loved it. It was a great opportunities, although it was difficult because being a Christian in a non-Christian place is quite a difficult thing, as many of you understand, working in secular workplaces. And so when COVID hit, I was substitute teaching at the time, and then I ended up going, oh, okay, I've got to use these skills that God has given me to communicate, to educate, and media was a big part of a lot of the classroom experiences that I created. And so when COVID hit, I obviously got a couple different jobs locally, the grocery store and at a couple different educator or bookstores and things like that, and tried to repivot myself in direction. Landed in a friend of mine saying, hey, well, I could use your skills doing media production for small businesses. And I said, I would be happy to do that. So I jumped in and got my own LLC. It's called Storyscape Design, which is right here. And Storyscape Design is basically where I am producing both educational content for people to consume and use in there as a resource, as well as helping you either set up your own media production or actually do some media production for you on specific projects. I work with the Volunteer Center primarily in Racine, is one of my current active clients, and I really enjoy working with Kelly Fergassi, a Christian conservative gal that does an amazing work, her and the whole crew really at the Volunteer Center in Racine. And so highly encourage you to check out actually what's coming up in their stuff that's coming up in the new year. They're having an educational training for kids to learn about finances, and it is an amazing resource that they are putting on, along with, of course, the Educators Credit Union and others, to talk about financial literacy. And so, go to the Volunteer Center of Racine's website or their Facebook page and take a look at what live events are coming up in January. That is one of their big ones, and I really highly check it out for your kids, grandkids, really, and people that you know, talk to them about that. So anyway, this is called sphere status, and this is where we take an examination of what's happening in these spheres today. We're talking about education, and we've got a lot, as I said, just being discussed. So let's get into what actually is happening in our communities around education. So let's take a look here. We're not going to do that one. We got to get the right one on the screen here. Video capture device, window capture. Yeah, let's just go to this one and do it. And one of these. A little breakdown communication here. So why is this not working? This is what happens when you do live, by the way. It does happen. Crazy stuff does occur. And you just need to go with the flow. Here we go. Okay, so we're back and running here. So what's happening right now? Well, Wisconsin DPI was the first thing on our list. Wisconsin DPI put out this report, that local districts report card. Sources are the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. Milwaukee meets few expectations, 59.5. Waukesha exceeds expectations. Not surprising over there in Waukesha. Kenosha meets expectations. Really? I know better. West Dallas and Milwaukee, 70. Racine meets expectations, and Wauwatosa. So you can see some of these districts are reporting high numbers. Others are reporting less than high numbers. But let me tell you, this is actually not what's happening on the ground floor. I sub in the Kenosha districts. I've also subbed in the Racine districts. And I can tell you what actually is going on, right? Now, let's talk about this. What is this? What is being evaluated, right? What is really these kinds of things? Well, ultimately, in aggregate, part of what's actually being evaluated is test scores and the grading system. And this is one of the most difficult things for a lot of parents and people to understand about grading, and of course, traditional educators. If you are a traditional educator in the system, you put a lot of stock in grades. And if you are someone who's gone through academics and you've gone training, you put a lot of stock in grades. The thing is, while grades can be a helpful metric on whether or not someone has actually just done some work. I mean, some of it is just completion grades, right? So did you get the assignments in, yay or nay? So that's one thing. But standardized testing is another. Standardized testing was developed by atheists. The goal of the standardized test was to evaluate people for military readiness, and it was adapted for the purpose of what was going to be used in education. It's ultimately for the purpose of, can you follow instructions? And so that's really what's being evaluated. Knowledge and the application of knowledge cannot be assessed on a paper pencil test. Why? Because knowledge is a matter of when you are in need in the moment, can you demonstrate it? That ultimately doesn't happen on a paper pencil test, because what happens on a paper pencil test has a lot of factors that don't actually equate to what a real life application of that knowledge is. When you are in a debate with your friend, your relative, or even a politician about something that's going on, you need to be able to draw from your historical and theological framework. That's the time in which you can evaluate whether or not someone has the capability of applying the insight that they've learned when they're applying it in a real world situation. So what we see here in the education space, what actually happens is that these are what's called mock or demonstrative knowledge. So what it really is it's like a proxy for what they're trying to do. And I like to think of it as a game. When you play a game, there are little metrics that give you points and that kind of thing to tell you, reward you and keep you motivated to continue doing the task at hand. Ultimately, the game itself is determined by how many of those points you win and how effective you are at gaining them, right? Well, that's really what the school system has built. They've built a game system that allows someone to demonstrate some form of expertise within the game system. And ultimately, that form of demonstration does, in fact, have some correlation in that you have to be able to meet the task to complete the game. You have to be able to understand how to keep a low ERA and make sure you're doing saves and things like that, on base percentage, things like that. If you want to win the game of baseball, if you have to one of the other games, you have to be good at, to some degree, understanding how the metrics work. But ultimately, the game is not actually won or lost by metrics. And that's the same thing with learning. This is an internal game that we've created to demonstrate some sort of form of competency, but ultimately what matters is when the application hits. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that in most districts, in our district in Kenosha, that is a significant question that we should be questioning, is whether or not, number one, they're even meeting the game metrics, but number two, can they apply this in the real world? Number three, what are they actually being taught and applying to the real world? These are questions that parents should really be examining and questioning. What's really happening here? And one of the most important ways we see what actually is happening in education is when broke. And when anything breaks, you get to see what actually has been going on in the background. And so when COVID actually broke our system, okay, when COVID actually made us completely stop and everyone had to go online and the parents had to have some form of relevance in regularly assessing and paying attention to and evaluating if their child is actually learning something. And the onus of an online educational experience no longer was the teacher at the full capacity to force, literally, is what actually happened in the classroom. People don't know that. Oh, it's inspiration. Yeah, good luck with that. It really is actually learning to use phases of pressure to get the student to do what they need to do. When the student is no longer in the actual room and cannot apply that pressure, what actually happened during COVID when everybody was doing school online is we saw the real world demonstration of how well those students are educated and know how to learn. That's what we saw. And so people reacted, oh, this was terrible. The online experience was terrible for kids. It's just terrible. We should never do this again. Obviously, we shouldn't lock down, and that was all tyrannical, and it was all terrible. It was terrible for our kids learning. Well, what it really was is that you got to see what your child is like, or your friend's child is like, without the teacher literally putting paper and pencil in front of them and half writing the sentences for them. And I'm not joking when I say these things. Some teachers are literally doing most of the work for your students, and that's the only reason they're even getting close to successful. Now, some students are there are a tiny sliver, I should say, not majority, a sliver of students who are able and functional to be able to work themselves. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, when I go in to teach these kids in substitute teaching, they don't know how to learn for themselves. And they are being what I like to call a high school in particular, less so of the younger grades. You could say maybe middle school, but really high school, it's a concrete playpen. And they are laying out all the toys, if you would, just such a way so little Johnny and little Jane want to do the thing a little bit, right? But the real world doesn't work that way. Once they hit the real world, they get the assignments in their email box from their boss. They have to learn how to self-order, accomplish the list, demonstrate that they accomplished the list, and articulate that and document it so that they are seen as a good worker. It's called CYA, right? That doesn't happen. That does not happen with these students. They don't know how to do that because they have been completely brought along by the system. And so the numbers are going to either reflect whether or not they're good at testing, but they will not reflect what actually works. And when you see pad testing skills, you're also seeing some districts don't play the game. That's sometimes what you see. On the other side, you see a level of not being able to discipline the students enough to even play the game well. Okay? To demonstrate skill within the game system, even though that's not really what learning is for. So, well, what are some of these factors? What are some of these factors that are preventing our students from learning, and what's going on? Why can't our schools just, what's happening? Because maybe they have good test grades, whatever, but we're still turning out students who, these young people in these current generations, in my generation, even before, I was homeschooled, so very different experience for me. My generation in the regular school system was not taught a lot of things, okay? Or were taught the wrong things. And so when we go to this next one, this is going to help give you a picture of what's actually happening on the inside, okay? Is what we actually see here, okay? Let's go to the next part. Cell phones in school. Racine Unified Board. This is from Racine County I. Racine Unified Board member calls for a reset on student use. We've been talking about this as educators for a long time, and for whatever reason, it's taken decades and people getting really upset, and then our students really seeing the consequences before anything's really been done about it, okay? But this is really nothing new. This is an objection and a problem that's been a major problem for the last, it's been minimally 5 years, but more than 5 years, okay? For almost as long as I've been teaching. So the Racine Unified School District says it's time to reset how students use their cell phones. Now that Wisconsin is the 36th state to restrict personal devices in classrooms. Worried about AI overuse, online bullying, the amplification of violence, and dwindling attention spans, Allen said cellular devices need a reset, that schools must start educating people on how to use this device properly. Very interesting thought there. So when will we have the ability, our kids are highly intelligent, challenging the intelligence to where it's at, where it's a benefits to them and not a deterrent. We have to do better with educating everybody about the dangers of pros and cons of what this device can infer and how it can endanger our future. Here's the thing. Our cell phones are designed to keep your attention. That is actually their design. That's a good thing on one hand, if what it is that you are needing to be attentive to is on this device. But when what it is that you need to be attentive to is not on this device, it's to an individual trying to get your attention. That's either your relationships, right? Or some form of instruction. This device becomes not an ally, but a distraction. And why? Well, in order for you to learn anything, it turns out human beings need to have the attention, their attention. We have no ability at this point to just purely download information to our brains without having attention. Attention is the foundation of learning. And when our students have access to the entire world, and in particular, culture that is of far more interest to their vegetables academically, which is what the classroom experience is like, eating their vegetables all day, this wins every single time. And you know this. It wins at your workplace too. If you've got this and you're not disciplined at knowing how to put it away, it wins, right? So this is one of the most challenging aspects of modern life. It is a problem that all of us have to face. However, one of the most difficult things is that in a formal classroom experience, when we are talking about how education works in the real world, you as the educator are the one that is responsible for delivering the information to the student in a large classroom setting. And you can facilitate it to some degree where they are self-investigatory. But when you have 30 students in a room who are all doing their own thing, that's not something you can really do as a single educator, right? Without serious disruption and distraction occurring, right? And so our school systems are built where the entire class has to have the teacher's attention, and the teacher has to be able to facilitate 30 people's individual learning, because that's actually what's happening, even though that's not what really happens. That's not possible to self-learn, to help people self-learn with 30 people at one time, right? So what ends up happening is you have to pull away all distractions to be able to gain the attention of the person you're trying to instruct. And so that with that as the case, cell phones are an absolute obstruction to learning in a classroom setting, because the way in which the individual gets to engage with the content is mainly from the instructor. But in reality, your learning is your own, and a teacher technically can't make you learn anything. And so in the 21st century, we have learning that happens based on our interests and our immediate needs, our interest and needs. For a teenager, the way we've got the schools set up, as I mentioned earlier, they are concrete playpens. Why are they learning any of this stuff? Someday, somewhere, at some point, they will need this for the real world. This is one of the major problems of formal education in the 21st century. We have cut off our students from engaging with the real world in their learning needs. And this is why it's almost impossible, once you put a device in there that connects them to the other world outside of the school system, for you to maintain their attention. And secondly, it also demonstrates, as I mentioned before, that learning has to be aligned to immediate necessity. There has to be consequence immediately, either for the learning experience, the positive consequence, or the negative one, the lack of the learning experience. And the difficulty is controlling that negative consequence, right? Because to some degree, some negative consequences are lethal. They're life and death, right? But then other negative consequences aren't lethal. They're just difficult. They hurt, They are very uncomfortable and can be traumatizing, right? So we want to limit that to some degree, but what the school systems have done in a socialist framework, which is what the school systems are today, they have limited the child's ability, the high schooler's ability, they're not really only children, they're young adults, from engaging with the real world. And so when they're actually trying to learn something in the classroom, it doesn't actually make any necessity for them. There's no connection. The teacher has to artificially connect things, which wouldn't be the case if they were trying to live in the world. If they had a job, and they had responsibilities, and they had to start earning a living, and they had to start aligning themselves with the community around them, being responsible for the community, and they had to be thinking about their long-term future training for getting where they want to go in life, including working their way either at this job or another job. If you take that away from somebody at their age, when they're looking for autonomy as a teenager, what you get is what you get. What you get is a class that doesn't want to be there, that has no alignment to learning, that the teacher has to play breads and circuses with the kids to keep their attention because they're used to a device like this that is entirely breads and circuses. The modern education system is set up to fail in the actual discipleship of a student, even in private schools. I've taught in private schools, including schools that are, quote unquote Christian schools, and they have the same problem because they're not willing to give consequences to students who do things that are either immoral or irresponsible, which is part of being immoral as well. When you don't give a student a real world consequence, then what they learn is they can get away with something and that you reinforce the wrong thing, right? So our education systems are not set up to actually educate people to engage the world as it is. They are designed to separate the learner from the world, put them in a sterile environment, don't engage what actually it necessitates human learning. And then they've been given a device like this that is for the purpose of connecting them to the entire world, World Wide Web. And you're going to have distractions. So on one hand, if you're going to have classroom instruction, I believe you must have students put these away, younger age students, because this is a slot machine, right? Now, secondly, there is a time in which the school should be having classes that are designed to use this wisely, right? And that is a segmented time if you're going to be in a formal classroom environment in which the student has to learn how to use their cell phone or have their cell phone without being distracted. That's the intent of the class, is to do a project. It could be a study hall or whatever. And the whole point of that is to accomplish a goal that is needed with this in hand without being distracted. And that that is one of the main instructional designs of that course. Okay, that is something that you should be doing. It is training your young people in that process, and then and it's the same thing as you're training anybody in anything. Okay, they have to be able to learn how to use this constructively, but not in a way that is ungated or guided. Okay, so that if you're going to do it in the formal classroom, you have to remove the phones from a basis to have a basis of attention, and then strategically reintroduce it with the goal of that being one of the main objectives, is teaching proper use of technology. That includes computers as well. And let me tell you, students do a lot of things on their Chromebooks that they also do on their phones. And they figure workarounds around, even if the school it blocks certain things. So this is something that needs to be a concentrated effort. But here's the thing. As I mentioned, the whole framework of formal education is not set up to engage the learner's necessity with engaging with the real world. It's set up to a gamified system that's trying to keep you engaged, but it's not actually giving you real world consequences. If you would, it's not giving you real world feedback. Feedback, my business is called Storyscape Design. One of the principles of design is feedback. Okay, when you're going to design something like, let's say, a dial, when you design a dial for something, the part of how you know you've reached the correct point, there's a visual cue, and there's sometimes an audible cue, and there's a haptic. It's called haptic designed experience, where it vibrates or it clicks. You feel it, move. Okay, those are designed deliberately because you have to be able to calibrate yourself based on responses, based on that kind of feedback. Well, when you are a human being in development and you don't have real world feedback in your process of development, you end up basically being unattuned at all to the realities of the world in which you live until you smack into it. Okay? And so this is one of the biggest problems, is that our classrooms are set up to push people out of what gets people able to orient and make that's not a good idea, I guess I shouldn't do that kind of response. Okay? You have to constantly introduce artificial simulations in the gamified process. Oh, that's a docking of points. Oh, that's a whatever. Oh, that means you stay after school. It's artificially engaged. It's not actually a part of how real world works. And so you're late to your job 3 times, guess what happens to you? You're written up. And if you're late 1 more time or 2 more times, you might be fired. That's real world, in particular in the trades, which, by the way, more people, more young men in particular, should be encouraged to go into, not going to college. That's another major problem of the education system. So, agreed. This needs to happen. Okay? Why? Because attention in a formal classroom environment has to be directable. And if it's undirected, then it won't be to an external thing that's way more interesting, that actually aligns much more of your interests. You're never going to be able to get anybody to learn anything. But next, as I mentioned, the design is part of this problem. And so one of the things this mentions was they're worried about AI overuse. Okay. So this is, again, an introduction of technology. Well, what is the problem? Obviously, we know, just like a calculator, an AI can be doing that for the purpose of linguistically or getting answers to things, right? So a lot of people have this question about AI. And so I noticed this fellow, which I blocked out what he looks like. And he mentions this concern that he had. This was posted recently that I interacted with. And he said, AI writing is everywhere now. It's showing up in big and little things, publications, emails, text messages, random speeches I hear about small local events. I can't unsee it. Seeping into the way people talk and think. Even without AI as a tool, people are going to start automatically mimicking its style. Huge alpha in being able to radically and ostentatiously produce thinking and writing that doesn't rest on AI syntax and verbiage. That's basically saying people are mimicking AI. It's not good. We shouldn't use it. We should just do it the old school way. Well, on one hand, one of the goals of education is skill training. And so part of a good education is going to train you in skills that allow you to be a robust person without that you yourself are your tool. Right? It's the classic thing for self-defense. You know, you don't need a weapon. You are the weapon. Right? So on one hand, he's not wrong in that absolutely we should be training ourselves to be able to be as effective as possible in and of ourselves, our entire constitution ourselves. Right? Our faculties, we should be able to hone and improve to a point where we are usable and effective and efficient. However, human beings are designed by God to be tool builders. And so part of our design is bringing into existence things that are creating things like God does. Right? Now, we aren't God. We can't be gods. But one of our main things is, how do we learn when we're creating a technology, how to appropriately use it in a way that honors God in both his design and his rules, but also do it in a way that is effective in the task. Well, so if we consider anything like AI or whatever, we're considering it as a tool, first and foremost. A calculator is also a tool. And so if you were to take what he said here, and I rewrote it here, if you put the word calculator in place of AI here, let's read how this sounds. Calculators used in business finance is everywhere now. It's showing up in big and little things, tax forms, budget reports, random seminars about financial stewardship. I can't unsee it. Seeping into the way people finance and plan. Huge alpha into being able to radically and ostentatiously produce financial analysis and reports that doesn't rely on computer calculations. That in-depth description is going to leave you going, well, that does sound kind of antiquated, like someone's living in a cave somewhere? Yeah, that's right. It's a calculator. Calculators have been a thing. First of all, they've been a thing even in the ancient world. We had calculators, okay? We had various forms of calculators. But then when the computer chip was invented, we had basic computers even before that. In fact, the Apollo missions to go to the moon, which, by the way, we really did go to the moon. It's historical facts. Those computers were literally calculators. That's all they were. They didn't have the capacity of what our phones now. This device in my hand is almost twice the amount of computing power that the last rocket used when it went up for Elon Musk. No joke. No joke. So that is incredible amount of power that, we've never experienced before in human history. But a calculator is a basic thing. It is a piece of technology that infinitely calculates and accurately calculates, generally speaking, the correct output, right? Well, we should learn how to do math because, number one, math is an expression of God's design. And so it is basics, especially when it comes to functional math. We should be able to do functional math that applies to the real world. How to do your finances, right? How to do whatever. But in learning how to do it, one also then can use an upgrade tool to make it more efficient and effective because it's no longer about the learning system that you are developing yourself. It's about completing the task and completing it effectively and efficiently and accurately, right? And so calculators are an aid when we already know what we're doing to then make this happen, right? That's how we should be thinking about all technology, generally speaking, is we should learn how to use our own faculties that God has made. And then we learn wisdom at using the tools in a way that's efficient and effective to make us more effective in the task, right? The task at hand. And so that would apply to all technology, and it would be very, I call it anachronistic to say, oh, well, we shouldn't use a new form of technology just because, like everything else for things. Okay. Number two, AI is a calculator. Okay. That's really what it is. Another way of describing what an AI is, this is what an AI is, but in a much more complex computer programmed. Does anybody know what these are? This is simply called a spiral graph. If anybody's actually used these before, what's going on here? Okay. Well, a human being is using a pen with their hand, so an animated, like if you would, prompt, and it's putting a prompt in there. It's using the animation to make it go. You're clicking, if you would, you're pushing it to make it move. And the gears, the system of gears, are making a pattern. And it can be a very complex pattern. And depending on how you use it, it's functionally can create very elaborate and different patterns, right? So a spiral graph is a basic form of a computer. It allows you to actually create something based on a human intention, right? And an AI is a incredibly complex one that allows for the self-referencing of itself as it's processing, and the analysis of other databases to bring to the task to accomplish a creative output. This is the creative output. Okay, so that's what it really is. And the machinery, the programming, is these rings and teeth, right? That's what it's doing. It's spinning, it's programming, it's adjusting based on intention of the operator. Okay, and that's all an AI is. Now, an AI is subject to two things. The first is the worldview in which the linguistic processor is being built with, and the worldview, truth claims, that the linguistic processor is being fed. Okay? So it's being built with and being fed. So part of what makes an AI effective and efficient and good, it depends on how it's programmed and what it's programmed on. And so that is partially what makes an AI have a difficulty, because guess what it's being programmed on? Strategic data sets from the internet. What's the internet filled with? It's not filled with just, randomness. It's human beings and their ideas and the communication of those ideas in all sorts of forms. Okay? That's what the GPTs are being built on. So it's drawing from humans. So guess what? Because human beings are fallible, sinful creatures, what will a GPT potentially output? A sinful output. Doesn't mean it's always going to input a sinful output. It can be guided to a correct output, but it will be fallible. It's like any of us. When we make something, it has human flaws. If you would, a GPT has a form of human flaws in that the data sets being brought in and the programming used to really be the processing has a worldview, has a set of truth claims about what it should and shouldn't do, and the priority of what those things it should process, what priority it should be. So that ultimately determines what actually happens when you ask ChatGPT to do something. So when we have this discussion about the ethics of what it outputs, it's always a matter of actually three things. What the designer made it to be within, what the data sets it's been put in, and the prompts that you've been training it to answer. And so partly, since it's self-referencing, it's learning from what you've previously done. That's what, by the way, an algorithm also does. It's adjusting itself so that it matches what you're looking for, right? It can bend the rules. It can bend things because it's copying human nature. It wants to please you. And so sometimes it can bend something. This is why, just like anybody, when you ask them what they think about something, whether it's, what do you think about what happens when we go to heaven? Or it's, what do you think? Why do you think you should prefer this sports team or this political group over this one? You're always going to get an answer that is what that person to some degree believes, what their data sets that they've been processing, the programming of that data set, of the way that person functions, which is the discipleship or training of that individual formally, whether they're by the parents, by the media, by themselves, right? By their experiences. You're going to get that. And you're going to get an alteration to please the person asking the question. That's just human. Okay? You're always going to get an output by anybody you ask in a way that's trying to answer your question in a way that you will receive the question and receive the answer. Okay? So a GPT is not doing anything different than a human being. It's what it's putting together, its outputs, and ultimately speaking, that it's going to communicate a worldview and try to please you in the process, right? So that when we're talking about learning anything, okay, this applies to the entire sphere of education, okay? When we are learning anything, the number one thing we have to realize is that every single source of information has a worldview. And a worldview is glasses, okay? It is a set of glasses that change the way you see the world. It changes the nearness of things, the farness of things. It changes the color and shape. It changes the depth perception. It changes whether or not you see them at all. Okay? Your worldview is your set of glasses that determines how you intake or perceive the world around you. That includes when you learn, especially. And so everybody not only intakes information, everyone else not only is educated and it's being fed through your worldview, but everybody who speaks, this microphone, everybody who speaks anything, communicates anything, is communicating a worldview. Now, what ultimately is a worldview? Well, a worldview is made up of truth claims about what truth is. I call them truth frames, just like your glasses. And they are ultimately made up of 3 to 4 general things. Number one, they're made up of your experiences, right? The things that you as you travel through life, you have certain experiences and you're processing them, right? People and the environment, people and things, right? You have experiences. And then you also have authorities. Authorities form the other frame of your worldview. People who have trained you. That's your parents. That's your teachers. That's your pastors. That's your favorite sports figures that you have given some form of value to, right? In particular, as an authority, that's what that is. Your values are ultimately the bridge point here, right? And then your values connect what it is that you're seeing, which ultimately is how you're reasoning, how you're processing. And think of the lenses and the frames of the lenses as your reason, right? So your authority, your experience, your values, and your reason, how you reason through those things, determine your worldview. Okay? I teach the kids this. So this is how we process life. When you're in the education space, whether you're listening to me right now, this is coming from a worldview and made up of all of those parts, right? So all of us are like that. ChatGPT is no different. It is built with a worldview, framed. It has authorities, which is its programmers. It has its experiences, right? Which is its value systems. It has its process of reasoning. And it has ultimately, I should say, its process of reasoning. And then it has its value systems of trying to please the listener or the prompter. Okay? A ChatGPT or any AI is no different than engaging with another human being. The only difference is it doesn't reason from a soul as a soul. It's going to process information within those worldview constraints. So it still operates within worldview, but it's not communicating as a soul communicates. So that's why whenever we're learning anything, whether it's from a book, I've got books, lots of books around here. Okay, we're learning something from a book, which is written by an author. Okay, worldview. If we're learning from a GPT, worldview. And now it's not the worldview of the conception of the immediate conception. It's the worldview of its data sets, the worldview of its programming, and ultimately trying to please your worldview, which is expressed in the prompt. Okay. So this is how this works, is that all things are that. And we have to process ultimately what we're looking for is truth claims. Because that's what we're looking for. So it's not a matter of authority when we're talking about education, because authorities are really like shortcuts. They are, I don't have to really test everything said person puts out. I trust, you have a certain amount of baseline trust that the person who's putting things out is doing all that they should do in order to process this in a way that is ethical or sound within the framework that you're looking for. Okay? That's what we mean by an authority, is that they've done the research and then you trust that they are communicating with you. The problem with that is that all authorities, human authorities, are fallible. And so what we should be doing as Christians is every person, every tool a person makes for communication, either one, needs to be processed deliberately, consciously, knowing your framework and whether or not what's being said fits your framework, and whether or not what's being said should adjust your framework, and which ones according to God's standard, because God's word is the foundation of all truth. And so ultimately what we need to be doing is processing first by the first priority of the Word of God. And in order to do that, you have to know the Word of God. If you don't know the Word of God, if you're not constantly putting yourself in, washing yourself with the Word, it's one of the things the Scriptures uses as that metaphor, right? You're reading through the Scriptures and you're studying it systematically, devotionally, collectively as a church body, then you are not going to be able to, with your conscious mind, process through the things that are coming to you and being told to you. You're going to then only rely on authorities whether or not you should believe something. Okay? So this is what we need to do as educated people, ultimately as Christians who reflect God. We need to have the mind of Christ, which starts with the Word of God, and we need to let us reason together. And we need to be thinking about how we've been taught in the past, right? Our authorities in the past and present, the things that of our experience, our values of what we're needing in the moment, what we need, and then thinking through our reasoning process on everything we're doing. And if we know what those things are, we are able to then take ownership and charge of our own education. This is what we should be doing in informing our young people, is learning this process, teaching this, and then putting them in an environment that allows them to self-learn without distraction. And when you have an environment of your peers that are not pointed at a specific direction, an objective, the objective becomes your peers, even in the midst of a classroom. And that's what happens in a formal education setting. So ultimately, what am I getting at here? From my experience as an educator, but also from my experience growing up, the most effective, efficient, and best way to educate a child is at home. At home is the best way to educate a child. Homeschool Legal Defense Association, if you're not familiar with them, you should be checking out this particular website, hslda.org/get-started. And this teaches you all the things that you need to know to homeschool. Now, you might not have kids right now, or you might not have children. Maybe they're grown adults, but maybe they have children. Maybe your friends have children. Maybe your people at church or work have children. Ultimately, the best environment for them to learn should be your home. Now, the question is it? Right? If your home environment isn't the best place to learn, that's another question what we should be doing to examine that. Okay, why? Well, if it's between your relationship, then maybe that's one of the things. Number one, you should still be doing this, because this will immediately require you to resolve your problems. When you have to be forced to have your children in the home and have a learning environment that is conducive for learning, you got to deal with your crap. Okay? That's what God's design for the parents being in charge of the education forces the parents to deal with problems. Okay? The responsibility you have to raise your kids, or your friends have to raise their kids, is immense. And it ultimately is the foundation of getting to the full big picture. We can't get to the full big picture that God has designed right here if the family is not in a proper alignment. The family is the place God has designed for education to happen. And so I'm telling you, the formal education systems are not set up to learn. I'm telling you this as a professional with thousands of hours of teaching hours behind me, as well as formal education in this direction and experience as a homeschooler. I can tell you they are not. And I can tell you that my education in homeschooling, matter of fact, 1 year of my education in homeschooling was far more pervasive and powerful than what most of these kids are getting. And this is the reason why our society is so screwed up. Because number one, we're outsourcing our responsibility to guide our own families. We're not going to church. We're not dealing with our problems with God, ultimately affecting the family and our relationships with our spouse. Okay? And then those two relationships are the foundation of everything else. If we don't fix the family, which is where education is grown, first started in the family, and then when we get to a teenage years, though they are ready for what sphere now? Work. The rest of their life, man. The rest of their life is this sphere for 8 hours a day or more sometimes. Okay? We haven't prepared our students for this. We prepare our students for more completely segmented learning off of not related to the rest of life. And then we wonder why they're not ready for life. It's not a surprise. The only way we fix this, the schools aren't going to fix themselves. And putting it on the schools was already not in God's intent. You're responsible for the development of your kids. If there are things that you don't know how to do, there are other families that you can go to church to learn from who have that. Homeschool groups have that same thing. Other families group together who know those things. And there's this amazing thing called, what do we call this thing? Let's put this back up. Oh my goodness. This could be your salvation. Not literally, but if you're going to homeschool, YouTube. Oh my gosh. The world's greatest educators right at your fingertips for free. And I can tell you, so there's a, let's see, it's called Studio Binder. My wife went to film school, and she spent all this money on film school, and then we found this site. This it's a software program for film producers, and they produce videos on film, on the industry, on learning movies and such. When we watch through these, my wife's like, "Oh my gosh, that's like my whole first year of film in one of these videos, let alone all of these videos." Okay. When we say, "Well, we don't have the knowledge." Ta-da! YouTube. I'm glad I introduced you. Okay? Oh, wait, but I can't figure out how to... Let me help you out. Oh my gosh. Ta-da! ChatGPT. But ChatGPT, it could be wrong. People can't be... If I said, I'll sit down with you right now and help you plan out your curriculum, you're going to say yes. But then when ChatGPT does the exact same thing, as a matter of fact, potentially even better, depending on how you prompt, oh, can't do that. Between ChatGPT and YouTube, the traditional education system is dead. Dead. D-E-A-D. Dead. That's supposed to be funny. This is real. The internet is the content library. If you don't think of YouTube as a library, then you probably have a generational objection, or you've been taught that. Because YouTube, first of all, your kids don't think that way. Your kids know YouTube is a library of content about everything. And they're asking questions. You know what they're putting up here? They're putting some of the most difficult questions you can ask up here and figuring out and learning. If you haven't set your home environment in a way that's going to help your kids process what's out there, let me tell you, you're not going to disciple your kids. The school systems really aren't going to do very good. They're going to get discipled by the media. And this is why when I put together my spheres, I added the framework for understanding that this is education media. Education is no longer done in a segmented classroom. It is all types of media, digital media in particular, that we use in the process of educating. Think about it. Every college class is based on a book, at least one book. Sometimes it's a collection of books, right? And when it's a classic thing when you're writing, books are made from other books. It's a classic thing when you say in writing. Books are made from other books. Movies are made from other movies. People are made from other people. Okay? So this is a library. These are the resources God has provided us in the modern century, more than any other human history. Nobody had this. This is way beyond the library in Alexandria. What are we doing with it, friends? Are we seriously, first of all, are we taking advantage of this as Christians? Are we putting content out there where other people, like your kids or somebody else's kids, you've framed it in a way that will answer their big questions? I have this saying, whoever appears in the feed is in the lead. I'm going to scroll. Whoever appears in the feed is in the lead. Now, my algorithm is different. But I'm telling you, whoever appears in the feed is in the lead when it comes to discipling your students, your congregants, your business people. Are you contributing to the education of the people that are most important in your life? Because maybe you can't reach them right now. Maybe you made some mistakes in how you've educated, or parented. Maybe you can't get to them right now directly. Well, that's what this thing is for. They're still on media. What we need to be doing is starting to create deliberately content for social media that will allow people to engage with the truth when they're ready. We don't need to push it at them necessarily. As parents, there are sometimes that's required. Sitting them down and having a conversation. But then creating content is the way you can impact church people, friends, family, congregants, students. My friends, every time someone opens the feed on a single platform, over 180,000 pieces of content are shown to them, potentially. Meaning if they kept scrolling. Every time, 180,000 pieces of content. Whoever's in the feed more is in the lead. This is ultimately the education revolution of our day. What are we doing to appear on the places where our people are being discipled? How are you going to take charge of the guidance of your students? If you have adult kids, this is even more impactful. Connect with them and strategically place information that is contextual in a way that they might hear it and engage with the truth. If they've walked away from their faith or from the principles they've been built with. It's not an easy path. Education's never easy. Learning is never easy. But God has given us an incredible age. We sit on the shoulders of giants, and all of the shoulders of giants in recorded history is available in our pockets. And we can share strategically with the people who show up on this device things that can impact their life for this world in a way that's effective, and ultimately for the world that's to come. Friends, I hope you've had a good discussion with me. If you're interested in having a discussion more, I would love to come and speak to anybody that you're like, Cody, I would love to hear, more people to hear what you're saying. I totally get it. I wish my church would get this. I wish my homeschool group would get this. I wish that other people would get this. Well, my friends, if you have one of these groups, whether that's church, school, a civics group of some sort, community thing, or a conference that you would desperately like a speaker for, I'm your man. I would love to be honored by speaking at your group to be able to talk about these very things that I'm talking about. Now, I speak on these 3 topics right now. Society by Design is the closest one. And anyway, I guess Discipleship by Design as well. We'd covered some of the topics we just covered today in education and media. But ultimately, what this is about is building God's order in a disordered world, how we can actually rebuild what God has called us to do. It's playing our role in God's plan. We can't actually do anything unless we understand our role in God's plan. And it's discoverable. It's right in Scripture what our role in God's plan is. Okay. Secondly is America by Design. God revealed an order system that our founding fathers completely understood. Now, they didn't fully work it. It took time to work it out into every part of how America ran, but they understood the foundation, and slowly over the course of that first generation or 2 of the founding fathers generation and framers, they worked in, by the time we got through the early part, we got to a place in America where our founders' vision was achieved, and ultimately we were living in a way that reflected God's order. That's why we had such a blessing on our country on many levels. People remember this as the 80s, sometimes in the 50s, but like those periods of wonderfulness were because our country was set up to run a certain way, and we were running a certain way. But my friends, we're no longer running that way. And some people are like, let's just get us back to the 80s. No, my friends, the 80s is not how we were built to run. We got to go back to the beginning. How did our founding fathers set us up? What is the foundational order principles that they understood that came from God himself? The third one is how we actually do this in the church. The church has to be the one to teach what God says on all spheres of life, right? So this is what this is talking about. I'm taking an opportunity every week. We're discussing what God is teaching us in these spheres. The church, your theology, yourself, your study should light all the spheres, and the church being the body of Christ, the group of individuals and families together should be deliberately seeking to disciple the people to lead in these spheres, our congregants, and teaching the world in those spheres what God says, and giving them an opportunity to come to know the God who made them and the God who made their sphere. That's our job, but we need to understand how will they hear without someone preaching? That's what I'm coming to talk about. I will talk about how God has designed the church to be the delivery mechanism of the good news, and ultimately the good news of how to run society. Not to run society, to teach people what God says about how to run society, all the spheres, right? When the church does this, we will have a flourishing nation again. The longer the church rejects it, the more our nation grows dark. the more our church stays in the pulpit or the pew and not in the public square and not in all the spheres, teaching people what God says and building it strategically, meaning when you're operating in the sphere, build these principles into what you're doing. It's right from God's word. And so this is ultimately what I'd be loved to come and talk to your groups about, if that would be something that you felt you might want, and you want other people to share in this. I would love to be invited to any of those environments, your church, your school, your civics, your conferences. Come to my website, storyscapedesign.com, and book a talk with me, or you can just, literally when you click this, it just brings up an order form, which is just going to be, it's basically just, are you interested, right? And it's going to explain what I specifically do and what I charge for these groups, these talks. But fill it out if you're just like, my church needs this. My political group needs this. My nonprofit needs, whatever you have, fill this out. And I would love to reach out to them and say, hey, someone in your group, won't have to mention your name, said they would really like to have my talk there. This is something that I'd be interested in. And you can, of course, if you wanted, if you felt bold enough to say, hey, I really want this speaker here. What do we think? That'd be something that I'd be happy to do. So storyscapedesign.com. I love to do that. Follow me on Facebook. You'll be seeing me more often. Once again, Thursdays, regularly at 7 o'clock. I will be streaming here on Facebook and YouTube. So go to follow me on Facebook and on YouTube. And Storyscape Design on YouTube as well, and you'll see me there. And I hope to see you next time on our next sphere. Our next sphere, let's go back over here. We're going to be covering the sphere of work. Imagine that. What has God talked about? What has God taught us about the sphere of work? What's happening out there? Obviously, you're going to talk about AI and its revolving work, so I'll show up next time if you're more curious about how we should be thinking about AI in the realm of work, and definitely get some pointers on that. We're going to talk about other aspects of work, things that God talks about, things that are happening in our world right now, and ultimately trying to bring glory to God and learning from what He says about how to order that sphere. So join me next time, 7 o'clock next week, Thursday, here on Facebook or YouTube. I will see you again next time.